Welcome to another episode of the Thunder Stock Show. I'm your host, Ross Stockdale, bringing the thunder to your business, one valuable brainstorm at a time. Our goal here is to tell you stories that will enhance your life, liberty, pursuit of property, and give you some insight on what it's like to live the EOS life. Dan is a serial entrepreneur, probably has the record for most people in his organization that become implementers, and quite a story to tell. I won't spoil it in the intro. Dan, thanks for coming on the show. How is it out there in Minnesota?
We're excited to have spring. Ross, thanks for having me. And, we have the 2 weeks of spring have just started. We're going to end up quickly in the summer, but we look forward to snow. So allows us to, have fun outside and keeps the riffraff out.
That it does. So now that it's spring and we're a couple weeks into quarter two of the year, you've been doing EOS for quite some time. You had an implementer for a while, and then now you have been an implementer for a while, and you have a whole network of people you worked with that are implementers. But before EOS was introduced into your life and business, and before you've done entrepreneurship 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, what was it like in the early stages of your career? Were you one of those people that knew you were an entrepreneur in your DNA and had lemonade stands? Did you shovel snow? Presumably there's a market for that.
Yeah, I also teach at the University of Minnesota's Home Center for Entrepreneurship. And one of the things I believe is we don't make entrepreneurs, we just make entrepreneurs better. And it's kind of a binary thing. If you are an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you had to have done things, but it's integral in your soul at some level. So yeah, I grew up, shoveling snow, delivering newspapers. I actually sold my first company in high school.
What?
Yeah, so
okay, let's dig into that.
That's not counted as part of the 5. But the point is, absolutely been an entrepreneur my entire life. I then actually worked for some entrepreneurial organizations in college and after college. And when I label them, you're just going to laugh.
Can I ask you, what was the business you sold in high school?
I had a video production company, and we did, all kinds of things. We did, the first thing we did was just, videotaping family events. Also did video inventories for insurance reasons. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing we did was we actually created and produced a television show. We bought time on cable. We made 16 episodes. We sold advertising, and I co-produced and I directed. The other person producer was also the talent, and we did all kinds of things. So that's a company I sold again in high school. So
for everyone listening, we have some younger viewers. And you say, oh, I don't have enough money or I don't have enough experience and I'm too young. Listen to this story because that's BS.
Even crazier. So I actually grew up in Milwaukee. I was hired to videotape some stage production of a show, a community show. Mm-hmm. Fast forward literally 10 years later, my wife, who I didn't know then and met in Minneapolis, was in the show that I videotaped as in high school.
That's a small world moment.
Yeah, it's a good, as I put that together, I still had the master tape. So I was able to, I don't know if she was happy or unhappy seeing her, 16-year-old self singing in a show or something.
So what are some of the entrepreneurial companies that you were a part of?
Well, so in the early 80s, this all dates me, mind you, I worked for the nation's second largest independent Apple dealer. In the mid-80s, I worked for Apple, and then I left, and in the late 80s, I worked for Microsoft. So, and of course, these were entrepreneurial companies back then. I was at Microsoft, their first public quarter, and my hiring class, we sat down and had a dinner with Bill Gates kind of thing. Just table.
How many total people were in the organization when you were in that level?
Well, that first quarter we celebrated with beer and pizza in the cafeteria, all of us.
Holy smokes.
A big cafeteria, but in a room.
Yeah,
in a
now they
room.
can't all fit in a room. Maybe a stadium, probably not a
Right,
stadium.
right, exactly. So, so again, early entrepreneur, but also technology. Technology's been, a big part of what I enjoy doing, and so that has led, down a really cool path.
What are some of the things that you've learned just by being in those environments with Woz and Jobs and Bill Gates that, people can only read about or listen to podcasts about?
Well, the cool part is their public personas really are who they are in great
Yeah.
ways. Woz was a guy who was just about creating. He loved tech. He could care less about money or anything else. That was who he was. Actually, one of my favorite moments early in my career was when LinkedIn came out and Woz linked into me. That kind of moment, just going, okay, that's cool. But actually, the most intriguing person that's carried forward more for me than some of, because you can learn an awful lot from what Jobs and Gates have done, but there's also a lot of pain in what they have done.
Sure.
The guy who carries forward the most for me is Guy Kawasaki.
Okay.
So Guy, was again at Apple in '84 when I joined Apple, and was he was an evangelist to get people to create software for the Macintosh before it existed. And but since then he's become really an entrepreneurial author, and one of my favorite books to give the startup entrepreneur is The Art of the Start, because there's so much wisdom in what matters and what doesn't matter, and the thought process of how do you create a product, gain capital to investment, other things. And I use both the book but also the concepts to carry forward in so many conversations I have with entrepreneurs, because one of the things he says is, what to celebrate. Don't
Mm.
celebrate your logo and letterhead. Celebrate your product market fit and getting to software release or releasing the product into the marketplace. Anybody can rent space and fill it with furniture. That's not something to celebrate. That's just a cost.
Yeah.
Just so
Right.
many things that are just dead on to that kind of conversation of what are we doing? How do we make sure we're doing the right things? And how do we know that we're tracking to them? So that fits into the EOS world, but he's got a completely different context.
I like how you mentioned the things to celebrate are more signals from the market or feedback from people that are either customers or prospects versus what I would call vanity or looking in the mirror metrics. It's just so important to keep in mind the people you're trying to help, and are you helping them or are you just
Right.
doing stuff to make yourself feel cool?
Well, and you have to do both in the process. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to but it's not exciting that I have office space. It's now I've signed an expense for 3 years, whatever
Yeah.
that may be. That's not the exciting part. The exciting part is, hey, look at this thing we've built. Is it getting closer to the public, and are they accepting it? So yeah, very much so.
So my next question is, there's a lot of people that at the early stages of these companies that stuck with it, and then with the IPO and the stock that they've been given in the early stages have become very, very wealthy. What then gave you the inspiration to jump into then starting several other ventures, not just once, a couple times? Like there's the safe route and then there's the entrepreneur and your soul route, which means you have to do it. Is it more the calling?
Uh, well, there's so many, doing it once is insanity. Doing it twice really defines insanity, right? And so I've repeated in kind of I'll call it the adult career 5 times, driving from that thought to fruition, and even then, well, there's a sixth one which we don't count because we created my business partner and I've had a business partner for all 5 of these ventures. So
Same one or
just
different?
same one.
Okay.
So we're 30 years into, we'll call it our second marriages. We're both married to the same woman too, not the same one, but our own same woman
Yeah, I follow.
for the whole time period. So we've had the second marriage, which is through business partners and companies and ups and downs and everything you can do. So, but literally, we had sold a company that we had created. This is kind of we'll call it the second company, and we did our management contract and everything. And
Mhm.
we had a no work kind of deal where we got paid for the last 18 months and weren't allowed to basically work because it's just
How'd
part
that
of the job.
feel?
Well, I thought it would feel great, but a couple weeks in, as I'm helping my wife optimize her household and three kids and helping the efficiencies of her kitchen and everything, she turned to me and said, "You better find something to do because you're not staying here." And so Scott and I created what's called the Minnesota Cup. And
Okay.
so this is mncup.org, and it's a breakthrough ideas competition that's now in its first year. We just closed the entries for year 21 on April 11th. We have 3,000 entrepreneurs, 3,500, I think, participating this year. We've helped like literally 30,000 entrepreneurs over the 20 years. We've given away almost $5 million non-equity to the winners. And then our companies are accounting for over $1 billion of capital raised and transactions and things in the state of Minnesota. So, when you say we're touching a lot of entrepreneurs, I've read a lot of business plans.
You mean it. You're not just talking the talk, you're walking the walk for decades.
Yeah. And so this thing, it's just really cool. It's become part of kind of the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in the state. We now have 9 categories. First year we had 2 categories and hundreds of judges and mentors, and we're trying to help everyone through the process that participates. We're selecting right now in the 9 categories. There'll be 10 people who advance, 10 companies who advance in each of the 9 categories. We drive that to a winner and runner up in each of those categories. And then we have a grand prize so again, all those people win money, but then there's a grand prize winner at the end of time will be October, where the 9 finalists or winners of each category then compete for the final slot of the grand prize winner.
One quick question is, what are some of the criteria by which they're judged? Like, how do you determine the winner?
So it's a great question because entrepreneurship is a broad statement, right? And so we're looking for breakthrough ideas that will affect employment and other motherhood and apple pie kind of things for the state of Minnesota.
Hmm.
So the idea is startup can be an idea or an operating company under $1 million in revenue when they enter. We might have somebody at $850,000. They'll cross over in the year of the competition, but
Hmm.
that still works. We're looking for the team, the idea, and kind of the economic outcomes as it relates to, hey, is this a big thing?
Right.
So when I say that, we have entries that are, this is a great location for a coffee shop or a pool hall, or I mean any kind of business. Those might be great entrepreneurial businesses, and I don't want to underplay the lifestyle entrepreneur business because
Sure.
I mean this is awesome. It's awesome, right? And gives people different freedoms, allows them to passions, whatever it may be. Those aren't what we're looking for. So it's not, I don't want to say disqualifying, but again, we're looking for who's going to employ 1,000 people.
Sure.
Kind of thought processes from an economic development. I mean, we've had great partnership with the University of Minnesota. That home center is where it actually resides today, and then the community, the business community, both in the form of sponsorship dollars. So we have a food and bev ag division, and there's sponsorship coming from General Mills. We have again across the board. Wells Fargo has been a sponsor since day one, and they're big SBA loan kind of opportunities. So in awesome ways, we just want to help entrepreneurs figure out if they have a good idea and then how to succeed. And the first one is, do they have a good idea? Because the best thing that can happen is we prove, or to yourself, you prove that it's not a good idea. But that actually is a positive outcome. The sooner you figure out it's not the right one, you can work on the right one.
It's the same thing with IDSing in EOS, right? If you
Absolutely.
have a meeting every week and everyone just high fiving and clapping hands saying we're awesome, there's nothing wrong, it's probably a really bad sign,
Yeah.
right? Like, and you need to have that, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Antagonistic, but also that other soundbite of a trusted advisor that their whole goal is to make you better, not to make you feel better. Right.
Right.
So sometimes the truth feels like surgery and lies feel like pain medicine. You know, what you're trying to really get out of them is, hey, if it can stand the test of this MN cup, you have a great likelihood it's going to succeed in the market, right?
Yeah. Very much so. And again, we want, the cool part is the whole group gets support. As you get farther down, the 90 will get assigned mentors. We do presentation support, help them with their elevator pitch. The whole goal is to help them get through the gauntlet. The irony is we have to pick a winner. And even
Mm,
worse, we're picking a winner from 9 categories that are almost not comparable.
sure.
Right. So it's in ways unfair. But my challenge, or what I put out there every year, is to anybody who isn't the winner, prove us wrong, right? Because there's nothing better than all 90 companies making it, or all 3,000 entrants gaining through the process.
It reminds me of the aphorism that it's more or less the journey than the destination, right? Because like if 90 of the companies, right, end up being successful, but there's one winner, then there's actually 90 winners, just not in the NM Cup
Right.
category race, which
Right.
probably going through the process of the litmus test increases the likelihood that there is dozens and dozens and dozens of actual winners.
Well, we believe, and actually, when you talk to the people who participate, they really do believe they won for getting to participate. Oh, and there's zero fees at any point. It's free to everybody, and the winners just get money.
Hmm.
Like we take, like it's as altruistic as you can do. And again, this just to remind everybody, this is all because my wife said, "Don't get out of my house." Like, dude, you can't help me optimize our house anymore. Go find something to do. And we were restricted. So 20 years later, it's an institution. And
Well, she put you in the right seat. She
right,
said this
exactly.
accountability chart doesn't fit you right now.
But it also is going back to what is an entrepreneur and how are you born one or whatever. I didn't want to play golf every day. That's, first of all, way too young. But the second thing is that's not who I am even today. I'm in July, we sold our fifth company and still part of, actually, I still have a role at the new company, the acquiring company.
Mm-hmm.
And you will love this because I went down to meet with them before the acquisition. They're in St. Louis, a company called Capacity. And I kind of said, hey, and they're doing a bunch of acquisitions. They're growing fast, but they weren't running EOS. And
Mm.
so I basically said, hey, I can help you, grow and do better from this point forward. And again, I was with them, the CFO and COO. They texted the founder, and we were getting together later. But the text was, and he's like, I'm in a YPO forum, and I forget the exact numbers, but 6 of the 8 in the forum are running EOS, and so now 7 of the 8 are right. Because it was already validated to him. And today, I'm the my title inside the organization is like executive vice president of EOS. So
Hey.
and also it's really an interesting science experiment in the EOS world because
Mm.
normally you're there 5 days a year kind of thing, right?
Sure.
You're just touching base, but we're trying to do it both differently but faster. So if you're implementing EOS, it takes 2 years to get everybody competent and all of the EOS tools, but also to be able to run L10s, be able to cascade down the organization. Well, cascading down the organization is usually a year 2 element, right? Year 1, you're working just with the leadership team. Year 2, they're implementing it down their organization. Well, we did quarter 1 with the leadership team, and quarter 2 is cascading down the organization.
Mhm.
And our CEO, he's big into what he calls machines, which are processes, right?
Sure.
Everything needs a machine. And so last week he's giving a presentation about driving better processes in different spaces. but he led with the 5 leadership capabilities. And so we're going to focus on number 4, systematize.
Okay.
That's his presentation to the company, which again, may be happening in every company we touch, but you never see it because I'm not there. Uh, and in this case, I hear the conversation about rocks and people's rocks and getting our rocks done. I hear the conversations that are, I'm in the quarterly meeting where they're showing last quarter's rocks, next quarter's rocks, putting up the VTO and sharing it. And again, those aren't things that you get to experience as an implementer in most situations. But
That's
since
interesting.
I'm implementing both for the company and then a handful of acquisitions they've made as part of that too. So
All right. So I'm going to pause and go to a certain timeline. So you've done video editing. You know, I would just like to edit videos. Where in the story did you get introduced to EOS? Because right now there's decades of wins, and it seems like, from the listeners are like, all right, Dan hasn't taken a loss. Usually 9 times out of 10 when I talk to people in the EOS world, they had a pain point that EOS solved for. It fixed a hole.
yeah,
So where did it fit in? How'd you get started?
so and I don't want to say we haven't had any pain points because I want to be really
Sure.
clear. We have.
Yeah.
Before EOS, we had pain points, and we were just lucky enough that we could manage through them, and they weren't fatal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kinds of inflections that could have been fatal. We figured it out. We made ourselves better because of it, and created and actually processed to eliminate the possibility of that happening again. So, and again, so we're kind of decent business operators before EOS. So we were operating, we created a company. So after the Minnesota Cup, we created a company called Magnet 360. And it had an investment hypothesis, and we were investing in a bunch of companies. And then we were using all of those companies to fulfill. We were doing the sales, project management, and fulfill what we were trying to get done. And so we had invested in a company. One of the companies was called Reside. And we had a portfolio of 30 companies. We had made 15 investments, 15 were just partnerships, and we were going to invest in more. And we noticed something really, really powerful in the marketplace, which was this company you may have heard of, Salesforce. And so
Yeah.
Salesforce was under $1 billion in revenue at this moment, and they had just bought some companies that gave them what they called the marketing cloud. And we had come out of marketing and advertising. So the last company we sold to WPP, the company that caused us to found the Minnesota Cup. We had sold to WPP, the big advertising holding company, and we ran basically all digital and non-traditional in North America for J. Walter Thompson. So, like, I had the title of Chief Operating Officer in North America, J. Walter Thompson, for all this non-traditional businesses, 13
Hmm.
offices, all kinds of things. So again, also saying I know how to operate businesses. This is pre-EOS.
Yeah.
We leave after serving out our contracts, start the Minnesota Cup, then we start up what we Magnet 360, and so we actually 6 of those 30 companies were focused on different aspects of how we could deliver marketing. So Reside being the CRM company, we had a data analytics company, we had a user experience company. Again, all of these companies. So we wholly acquired all 6 of those. Reside was already running EOS. And when we invested, that's the first time we saw the VTO, kind of saw the book. And so we started without an implementer ourselves using the VTO and L10 structure.
What year was this?
8, maybe?
Okay.
Somewhere around that time period. Their implementer was a guy named Peyton, or Mike Peyton. For those of you in the community, he was the second visionary of EOS. He became the visionary after Gino.
Okay.
And so Peyton, and I believe Reside was Peyton's 3rd customer. So
Hmm.
from 2008 to 2016, Peyton was our implementer. And when you become an implementer, the videos you watch and learn from are Peyton. So I've already spent called a decade in the room with Peyton, and then I had to watch training videos of the same guy to become
Of your
certified.
sessions,
Yeah,
probably clips. Hey, there's
yeah.
me.
It wasn't quite our sessions; they're fake sessions that he's in those videos. But it's really cool, and I there are 7 people from our leadership team and team that became implementers. Through again through
Sheesh.
through Magnet 360 and our acquisition of Reside, all these people became in the afterworld became EOS implementers. So there's a that's where I believe that's a record for a single company spinning out.
I
And again,
I
I was the
imagine.
I was the CEO, and actually, one person who's not an implementer, but he's actually running part of a company called Traction Capital. And so
Okay.
Traction Capital, Matt Means, who was the CEO of Reside, the company we bought, they have a fund that invests in companies that are either running Traction or agree to run Traction as part of the investment. So kind of an early stage fund. We're in Fund 2, raising, I think, $50 million kind of fund. And again, we do work with those companies, both Scott and I, and kind of help all about helping those companies succeed. Again, for our investment in the fund, but also we just love helping companies succeed.
If I had to pinpoint a couple of the key milestones, it's you've successfully launched and exited 5 startups. The MN Cup, you've impacted many lives. I'm not going to put a number on it, but it's a lot. And I mean, you've had the same business partner and wife that you met when you were 16. You didn't even know that was going to be your wife, and the same business partner for 3 decades, going on the 4th decade. So there's a lot of how do I say, core values caked into those milestones, right? Like loyalty and just having patience and long-term vision and all those things can be true. But with the high points in mind, like what are the core values that you would ascribe to the businesses, the common themes, right? I'm assuming you of those 5 companies you had, probably similar-ish core values, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of them carry forward. Some of them are differentiated in different ways. Kind of one of the big ones, and I want to say for people who don't understand, core values aren't ethics,
Sure.
even though they should be, but we don't say them, we assume them, right?
Mm.
So we're running ethical businesses. We're doing the right things on behalf of all of our constituencies. So whether that's investors, whether that's our employees and team members, whether that's our customers and the communities that they serve. And so I don't want to, but there's an element of that that ends up being the why you get to succeed and do other things too. And we don't talk about that as core values, but we do live that. Right? You got to just be doing the right things. And there's so many opportunities to do that. One of the things that we've always had in our business is the concept of shared ownership. And you
Okay.
can say it different ways, but other things. But we want, and while that can be reflected in stock options, other components, what's more important is the understanding of what it means to be an owner and share those concepts. And so it's the little things like I walk by a piece of paper in the hallway, it's on the ground. Do I pick it up? If
Sure.
it's in your house, you pick it up. If it's at your Fortune 100, you don't. And we want to make sure everybody does. And the paper metaphor is anything, right? What needs to be done gets done. kind of a thought process.
It
And
reminds me of the most benign ethical test. It's instead of the trolley problem, where if you pull the lever, then one person gets run over versus 4, etc.
right.
It's what do you do with your grocery cart when you're done? Do you
Yeah,
put it away or you just leave it hang?
absolutely. I put it away, or even when someone's emptying, I grab their cart for them on the way in. But the second thought process, or even around shared ownership, is also how you spend money.
Hmm.
So, when you're on an expense account, traveling somewhere, it's on the company, I'll do that. And sometimes it's the right thing to do is spend money to entertain clients, do whatever you need to do. But kind of go back to, if it was your money in your household or your company, how would you spend? So do you need to stay at a $500 a night hotel, or is the $300 a night or $100 a night good enough?
Sure.
Kind of thing. And there's sometimes where you have to be in the scene, right? You have to be, that's where the show is. The inefficiency is going to cost more than, I'm spending hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars to have you at the show. If it takes, an hour and a half for you to get there every day, that's an inefficiency. We want to spend more money. But if you can stay next door for half price, stay next door. And actually we were interviewing a candidate once, and we flew them in, and this is at Magnet 360. And then he went out to dinner and ordered a bottle of wine. And then the expense voucher came. I mean, he lost the job by submitting his expenses from the trip. Like, if you think you're going to live that way on us, there's no way. And it's the concept of shared ownership and
right,
we're
because
entrepreneurial.
Those decisions compound over time, and what might just be a one-off bottle of wine, if the context isn't right, return recurrence, and it adds up to big things, and especially when other decisions are on, too.
Yeah, and again, it was a leadership role, and we didn't see that as a cultural fit.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other concepts we've always had is the concept of experimentation, right? We want people to try and learn, so we don't want to shoot them for trying. We want to make sure that we're trying, learning, and educating, so we're not making the same mistakes twice. But the best way to kind of iterate or improve is by kind of trial and error in different spaces. Our current CEO has a great way of saying that. Different, again, this is his life, not mine. But he says, I want people to get speeding tickets, not parking tickets, right? So, but it's a great answer, right? I want you to try. And if it's not the right answer, we'll give you a speeding ticket, but that doesn't mean you're going to jail. It's just a speeding ticket.
One of my core values, Dan, it's a phrase from a content creator years ago. It's keep on sending it. So the idea is, this person was famous for snowmobiling, which I'm sure in Minnesota you see quite a lot of. Yep. And there's like three types of people. People that are like, oh, I'm not going to do this jump, so I'm not going to try. Doesn't fit the core values. Yep. People that try and fail, and they're like, ouch, that hurt, or I'm embarrassed, and they stop. And then people that keep trying and failing until they finally get it. And like that's the bucket that I look for.
Right. And again, through that, you become better.
Mm-hmm.
You also learn what not to do. And again, the goal is to only not do the not do's once.
Sure.
Right. So if we tried that, and great communications, all kinds of things. So, but living core values, and one of the things, again, we were acquired, right? And so they have, I don't know if anyone's heard of this tool, Slack, right?
Oh, I use it every day.
I know, exactly. So there's a Slack channel that they had called Shoutouts, right? Okay. Just where you get to shout out what's done. Of course, as I came in and we did, we redid the core values, and through the process and other things, I created a tool in the Shoutout channel that says, who are you shouting out? And you get to write a little paragraph. And that says, what core values did they demonstrate? And so these are Capacity's core values: hustle, ownership, proactive, excellence, and humility. But there's just check boxes. So did they do 1, 2, 3? So we're again reinforcing every day the core values in the company by saying, hey, somebody did a great thing, and that great thing is associated with what these core values are.
I love that.
So, and again, this is now a tool in their Slack, and I'm geeky enough to have been able to build the tool for them. And I just created it and showed it to the leadership team, and they're like, "Yeah, let's do that." So, and now every shout out is related to associated with the core values that people demonstrate every day.
Dan, what's one thing that you wish you would have known earlier in your journey, that you've learned through maybe your fifth exit versus you didn't know in your first? Obviously, there's probably a ton, but what are one or a few?
there's right the learnings over time. There's many. The biggest kind of ahas I have as kind of the first through the first startup. Again, the one again, not counting the high school things, but startup with 100, 300, 600 employees kind of model. And I learned just the power of some. I'm going to call it specialization, but the 10-person organization, you're just brute force and say youth. We had brute force. We could figure out how to get things done. And then as we grew, and I'll call it 50 people, and there's some plateaus and things that happened with formalization, communications, all kinds of things. You hit 50 people. With 10 people, you can't help but everybody knowing everything. With 50 people, you run into challenges about communications. And so that's and some of that is, again, EOS addressing, conceptually the VTO and understanding the directions and other things. But this is day to day and every step of the way. But the other thing that happens is I interviewed and was part of the hiring process of every one of the first 50 people. But the next 250 people, there's no way you can be that.
Sure.
And so the first thing you learn is when to let go, right? Which is really, really important. And it's empowering great people to do their jobs. But it doesn't work if you continue to do their jobs. Oh, and if you hire great people to do their jobs and then do their jobs, they'll quit because I just hired the expert. And I use examples like HR. Well, we didn't have HR. Then we bring in professional HR. Everything improved over time. And you go, what did I do without HR? Even finance, we had a bookkeeper, a controller, a CFO, and really fractional didn't exist in the same light back in that era. And so literally just knowing that, like, you can't bring in finance and HR soon enough, because by the time you can and really can afford them is also part of it. So, you're already behind the 8 ball. So I would probably push earlier in the cycle to get some of those people in, even though you got to be able to afford them. So I don't want to say make bad financial decisions, but all of a sudden, I'm already at 50 and I needed 100 people. Well, the HR person probably should have been there 6 months earlier. And the same idea in finance and learning. Again, this isn't to say I don't need, as a CEO or integrator or whoever you are, you don't need to understand your finances. You do, but finance is just a right hand that helps you with all your what if scenarios.
Sure.
So
it's a
if
decision-making function.
finance isn't financial reporting, that's a checkbox. That's a bookkeeper. They can tell you exactly where you are in any given day, but it's just QuickBooks at that level, right? But what you need is here are the 3 potential scenarios. How does it look? What's it going to cost us to get there? And what's the output or outcome that we think we can achieve? And those are financial forecasting and financial futures. And you need a partner to be able to run those scenarios. And then, you think you're good at Excel, and then you see an actual finance person use Excel. I mean, and I want to say I'm really, really good at Excel, and I don't even touch what a professional finance person can.
But people ask me, how are you at Excel? I said, well, it depends. And they're like, what? And I said, are you comparing me to my father who really doesn't know how to use it? Or are you comparing me to my former business partner and fractional CFO who can probably do it with his eyes closed and make insane calculations? Because compared to one, I'm awesome. Compared to the other, I'm a novice. That's where we're at.
Right. Absolutely. And that is, I'm in the same boat, right? I'm competent for a CEO. I'm incompetent for a CFO. So, and again, it's a tool though. The other piece is project management, which the tool becomes an interesting statement here too, because people say we need more project management, and they bring in a project management tool. That's like saying we need more authors, and we're going to bring in Word.
We're going to give you pens.
Right.
Everyone gets a pen.
Right. Everyone gets a pen, so write a book. That's not how it happens. The tool is the tool. The tool makes, can make everything better. And we use tools everywhere. I don't want to make it sound like that's not a good idea. But you need people who know how to operate the tool, know how to deliver the concepts. And project management is a big component of success in most businesses in some form, right? How do you get stuff done?
Oh
The
yeah.
process definition is one thing, but there's a whole bunch of project management, at least in all the businesses I've been involved in, that good project management is one of those same kind of hires,
Look,
right? I actually need a professional project manager.
I don't have a PMP. I'm never going to pretend that I have a PMP. I've done project management because I have to, right? But
For sure.
when you talk about tools, different obviously with tech, there's hardware and there's software. When you're thinking about tools of project management, I look at the EOS as like the software, the program by which you run. And then the way you utilize the program would be like the hardware, or like whether you choose Asana or Monday, or I like 90.io. Some people use spreadsheets or pieces of paper. I don't like those as much, but hey, to each their own. But for me, as long as it's an EOS framework where we have a scorecard and we have our to-do list and we have our rocks, like I can do that in my sleep. But when we start doing just whatever else, I can learn it, but it's a operational drag. I think you're spot on. I had a conversation yesterday, and I want to highlight artificial intelligence, not to deep dive and have any horror stories or scariness about it, but really as a glimmer of hope. I had a conversation yesterday with a friend who is a colleague, had a career as a chef. Now he's essentially COO, general manager of a pretty decently successful company. I introduced him to artificial intelligence and I said, "Hey, this might work for the business." And he just took off and ran. And we talked about this yesterday, and it's like having AI is like a chef having access to premium ingredients. If you know how to use it, you can make a pretty darn, whatever kind of meal you want. But if you're not a chef, you're just going to waste great ingredients and it's not going to make that big of a difference anyway. And I think
Right.
that's similar to project management. I think that's similar to functions within businesses. It's tools are great, but you need to have it's really human capital and human energy that make it useful.
Yeah, totally. And I want to I haven't really highlighted AI at all, but the company I just sold was an AI company that is an enterprise knowledge management software package. It was called Lucy. It's now called the Capacity Answer Engine. But what the Capacity Answer Engine does is literally connect to all the data inside a company. You
Hmm.
know, all the SharePoint servers, all the third party data sources, all the documents, videos, audio, and systems to dashboards, other things, and then allows you to ask a natural language question of your own data. And I know everyone goes, "Oh, an LLM does that." Nope, this is not LLM based. This is because we started this 8+ years ago before the LLM.
Mm-hmm.
And but also we have layers of security in it. So LLM is all the data to all the people.
Sure.
This is you only get answers from the data you're allowed to see. Our tool is deployed at American Express and Kraft, Heinz, and Pepsi and Procter and Gamble. So this is done at enterprise scale. It's also done much more in mid-market and other places. And then I know everybody thinks the AI started in November of 22, but we deployed the first instance of using an LLM. So we give you all these answers that we found, and it can be from 1,000 different systems. We give the top 10 answers. But then we take those answers and we synthesize that into a synopsis of all of the answers from all of those places. And there we used an LLM and we rolled that out in February in production in February of 22, 6 8 months before anybody knew this existed, in a product for SAP that was the first implementation. And so, a couple things I just want to understand. AI is such a powerful tool, and people need to figure out how to do that. We're, in addition, in our EOS world, but we're running AI strategy sessions for companies
Mm-hmm.
where we'll come in but we guarantee ROI. So part of EOS is always a guarantee. And so we come in and do a session with the team, kind of we'll call it a day session. We do some pre-work, but in the near term, midterm, and long term, we create kind of, these are the things and where you should go. And we guarantee the near term will pay for our session, kind of thought process. But it's because it's an unfair advantage that exists today in the marketplace to those leveraging AI. And in some ways, it's easiest for the very small companies because you could just use the consumer product.
Sure.
In some ways, it's the big companies are doing big things,
Hmm.
and this mid market is just getting bypassed by paralysis almost because they don't know what to do, they don't know how to do it, they don't know how to get there, and so we're really focusing on helping people leverage these. We are just at the we're at the very start of what this can do for your company.
Couldn't agree more.
But it's an opportunity for all companies. And again, we've been doing AI in some fashion for the same 30 years because it wasn't invented in two.
Right.
It's been around since the 60s. In some forms, and so we just want to really help our companies, these entrepreneurs, the people we work with, succeed using the tools that exist. And there's tools that exist that can help you every day in this space.
Well, specifically to the mid market that you talked about, how it's almost a reverse bell curve as of present day. One of the projects I'm working on is for AI for the C suite. So it's for mid market companies, 50 to a billion, several hundred million, for their C suite to understand how it affects that market segment. And it's super valuable because, like you just pointed out, there is that little gap in the market where they feel like, whether it's lost and where to go, where to turn. And what I'm finding is that, the people thought probably when the internet existed, it was kind of a comparable technological trend that the internet in the 90s, like, oh, this dot-com bubble. Internet came out way before that. I talked to somebody who was in the military that was doing it in like the 70s, privately and not public. But it's how do we make the tool fit for our needs and use cases? And there's a lot of strategic thinking that needs to go into that. My next question for you, in terms of strategic thinking and using your own experience as your own LLM, right? Your unique thing to draw off of and compute, is one of my favorite questions from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is, what's the answer to life? But I'm going to
42.
42. You got it. Exactly.
I know the answer.
You do. But what is the one challenge that if you solved would have the most significant impact? And I can't wait to hear your answer.
Well, so we have this opportunity, and again, equating it to the internet is a great thought process, right? Because if we look at even the LLM today or ChatGPT as the consumer tool,
Mm-hmm.
is completely facilitated because of the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where they found the knowledge to create the LLM itself, and that whole process was internet enabled, and our access is internet enabled, and all kinds of things. We have the opportunity to solve real problems leveraging this technology, or these sets of technology. I don't want to make it too but AI is going to help us cure cancer, and it's not just kind of going to help us, it's going to drive to and actually Bill Gates said 10 years ago, as part of, because he's been working on this himself and through his foundation, that the cure for cancers, many cures for cancers, because it's not one thing, but already exist. We just haven't tied the information together, right?
Right.
So there's researchers in 100 places doing research on this, and if they all knew what everybody knew, the answer's already in there.
It's like core values. You just have to, invent
Right.
it. You have to just uncover it.
Right. And so literally, when you start looking at those kinds of challenges, and I want to say I think we have an issue with environmental issue in that, look at the storms that are happening, and I don't care what the cause is. I want to say you can say we did it, we didn't do it, doesn't matter. It's happening, right? The data is there. The globe is warming. We're getting ice caps are melting. I'm not as concerned about it as many, because I also think we're going to solve our problems with this technology too.
Right.
So we're going to have to deal with whatever it is. And again, is it the cycle of the earth? Because I live in Minnesota and we have 10,000 lakes. Those lakes were caused by glaciers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, is it just the cycle of the earth, or did we accelerate? None of that matters.
You're not concerned with the cause, right?
Right.
You're looking at the solution, right? It's
Right.
not ID D, identify,
Right.
discuss, and dwell. It's
Right.
identify, discuss, and solve.
Right. So if we can figure out what that looks like, and
Hmm.
whether that's, building locks and controlling the sea somehow, whether that, I mean, whether from energy consumption, how do we capture the energy that already exists in the earth as opposed to doing other bad things. All of that, we'll figure that out. And I think all of that is going to be accelerated by the use of AI. Again, we have productivity curves, and we have, various transition from the farm to the factory, from the factory to knowledge work. And now we're going to see another transition. I can't tell you exactly what the future is, as much as we've always solved it both with technology and implementation. And so we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it with, and the other piece that's coming is also the overlay of quantum computing.
Of course.
And so that's still, while people are doing that today, it's still in the science fiction category,
Of
but we'll
course.
accelerate quantum computing because of all this too.
One of the things you said off camera was you leave the ideas to those who are yet to come. And I think of that as how I define faith. The opposite of certainty and the opposite of because certainty is like, there's no way it's 100%. But, like you said before, that the tools are in place. Your job, what you've been doing with MN Cup, is help develop and nurture the economy in the future and these people with the ideas that are going to act on it, so that you can touch the lives of many by facilitating. Just with one winner, you've gotten thousands and thousands, if not millions of people's lives bettered by focusing on one winner at a time, right? And instilling those values and have it trickle down. It's not the people. I don't want to get into economics, but the idea of trickle down economics could be up for debate. But I don't think the idea of trickle down education is up for debate, right? Like there's a major impact when you can touch the lives of just, even if it's just people in your session room. That affects the company. Then if it affects the company, possibly affects their families. Then it affects their community. Like that, I think in the confluence of what we're talking about with the implementation uses of AI and how it affects the world, I can breathe a sigh of relief. I think you can too. That it probably will be okay, but it's not up to one person to save it all. It's the collective resources of humanity doing the right things with enough data and the right tools to make the real impact.
You just said something which also goes way back in the conversation to core values and ethics and other things. But you said that employer owns the whole ecosystem, not the employee. Like the responsibility isn't for just me to my employees. It's my employees, their families, their communities.
Yeah.
And by that interconnectedness, we're all driven to the success that we want to achieve. And when things aren't going well, I don't look at the 400 employees. I look at the, you know, 1,200, 1,800 family members, and then the community, the school, all of the things that we have to be part of making better. Again, corporations make our communities better,
Shared ownership.
and shared ownership is extended to the families, and so we have to include them in our thought processes and our outcomes, and do great things that benefit all.
I'm going to ask one more question before I ask you to share how people can get in touch. And that question is, if you could converse with yourself and you're 10 years old, 8 years old, early stage,
Yeah.
what is one life lesson that, not to say you do it over, change anything, not regret, but you're just like, look, this is something I'm going to tell you. It's a nugget that you can digest and you can know from my experience that it's true. How would that conversation go?
Well, if you remember back in school, you're trying to do things, you got all kinds of stuff. Everything was like, this is going to become part of your permanent record, whatever
Mm,
that means.
right.
Has anyone seen your permanent record? Because I haven't.
No one cares what I got in the essay.
Right. None of it matters in the big picture, in the long term. It gets you to the next step. It's not don't do things. But I would encourage people to take risks. If you thought about it, and it's not to jump off a cliff and be stupid risks, but to try, experiment, learn, and that can be, did I learn how to play tennis? Did I learn how to, whatever it is, what made you think I'm going to look stupid when the first time I pick up a tennis racket. Well, I can't tell you how many times I've looked stupid the first time I've tried anything. And that's still today in business or different places or,
It remains true.
right. So the idea is just go for it and just go for it. And don't worry about the permanent record and don't worry about what other people are going to think. Because the more you focus on that, the less you will achieve or do.
I love it.
I just encourage people to, again, get a speeding ticket, not a parking ticket. It's the same idea. Not my words, but I love them because we just want you to go out and try stuff and learn. And it might be you'll never be a good tennis player. That's not the problem. The problem is if you don't know because you never picked it up. And I might add, as old man sitting here, I mean, it's a lot harder to pick up a tennis racket today and take up tennis, right? Just muscle memory, all those things. The earlier you try those things, the better you're going to become.
A decade ago, Dan, I thought I had it in me to be a professional athlete, and specifically in the UFC, to be like a professional mixed martial artist. And I said, you know what? What I'm currently doing is not getting me any closer to this dream or aspiration I have. So I tried. I gave it my best effort, and I'm so grateful I did for two reasons. One, I learned that it's not my calling, but I also learned that you can try and fail, and you can be way better off because I don't have the regret of what if. I already know.
Yeah. Well, I have a 27-year-old son in New York who's working on acting and as a career. He went to NYU. I mean, he's got credentials. Mm-hmm. He acts every week for money, just not a lot, and all kinds of things. And actually, my father, who's 92, is one of the most encouraging people for him. And the whole point is you got to do it now because when you're 45 and you didn't do it, you're going to regret it. When you're in your teens and you can live on as little money as you possibly can and work through that. And we're not funding it. You got to figure, if that's what you want to do, figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
And he's worked in restaurants and he's worked, done retail, all the things that you would expect as part of that process. But please, now is the time. Go do it. Check it out. Because again, I can't consider mixed martial arts for a lot of reasons. I did play hockey and I was a goon, so I do know how to use my fists. I just want to say that. So I do know how to use my fists.
But you don't want to have to use them at your age.
Actually, this is a totally different lesson in life, but we have 3 sons. Mm-hmm. And we taught them to be gentlemen. We taught them all kinds of things. And we taught them messaging. Anyone can get into a fight. The skill is getting out of a fight.
That's right.
And then the second message is, if you're in it, don't lose.
Yeah, don't lose.
Those aren't counter to each other. My sons can talk their way out of a fight. That's win. But if you think you're going to challenge my sons, they also know how to fight.
It's important.
So, and it's the same. That's the same metaphor in business, though.
It's the same metaphor. I will tell you that the greatest incubator for becoming better at being a business owner and entrepreneur wasn't my W-2 jobs, although they were helpful. Wasn't sales. It was helpful. It was trying to be a cage fighter. That was the biggest similarity between the mental state and the stress and pressure and like pain that I experienced as an entrepreneur. So there we go. That's the ROI.
Perfect.
Well, Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Everyone listening, can you just tell people how to get in touch and follow along? And maybe if there's some people in Minnesota that want to sign up the MN Cup, they can sign up. How can we do it?
Absolutely. And so Scott and I, my partner, we do most of our business today through a company called magnetive.com. If you want to book an appointment with me, I have a URL, traction.youcanbookme or youcanbook.me. Traction.youcanbook.me. And You Can Book Me is one of the companies that I am an EOS implementer for. And it's a great Calendly-like tool that has HubSpot integrations and other kind of much more small business advantages than Calendly.
Excellent. Well,
Ross, I appreciate the time today. It's awesome to get to know you and share some stories and hopefully help some people learning through their process.
Shared ownership through shared stories. Everyone listening, I hope that you had as much fun as I did on this podcast. And if you did, I don't run ads to the show. I don't plan to. However, my one ask is please share it with a friend if you think they'll benefit. Until next time, everyone, be well.